And I would actually say the moment that pressure eases, then even the people who are in the public eye today will be able to escape accountability. So it's important that even as difficult it is during the holidays, at least after the holidays, the public continue to hold the government to account on its promise na maraming magpapasko sa kulungan.
Thought-provoking conversations with the people shaping our country. We uncover stories behind the headlines with influential voices from the Philippines and beyond. This is Manila Bulletin's The Sitdown.
Welcome to another episode of Manila Bulletin, The Sitdown. I'm Elson Quismorio, Senior Section Editor, and I'm here joined by...
I'm Philip Cunhing, columnist and sales consultant for the Manila Bulletin.
Today we have our very special guest here, Batangas 1st District Congressman Leandro Leviste.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Cong. Cong, I would like to congratulate you right off the bat for being the first guest in our lechon room.
It's always nice to see a historic building like the Manila Bulletin office.
Thank you, Cong. I've been covering you in the 20th Congress since July. And one of the quotes that really stuck with me, Cong, you said you eventually plan to give away all of your wealth. That got me thinking, Cong, do you really literally plan to do that? Won't that upset your relatives, your eventual wife?
I've already started because in my district we have scholarships for students, and that's what I pledged to commit most of my foundation towards, apart from relief for typhoon victims. So far, I've transferred around 6 billion pesos worth of shares and cash into a foundation that so far has been focused on helping people in the 1st District of Batangas.
But would you really leave just the minimal amount for your bank account just to,
in the US, it's increasingly common because it's satisfying to be able to use what you worked hard for to help other people in your lifetime rather than to pass it on to someone who will use it after you're gone. And I actually wonder why not more rich people in the Philippines do that.
You're talking about philanthropy, Kong.
Yes, to me it just seems like the logical thing for any rich person in the Philippines to do.
But you don't find it common here?
It is not yet, but given the inequality in the Philippines, it's definitely much needed. And what I'm also pointing out is that it is also in the interest of the person because it's more fun, I think, to help other people than to just be rich but keep it all to yourself.
But the mechanism would be you channel all your personal wealth into a foundation. And then basically the foundation now will take care of certain living expenses and stuff like that that you maintain or you establish as a standard that's done within the foundation's expenses.
So far, I've transferred part of my shares, and the rest I'm still awaiting to appreciate in value in my lifetime, and then eventually transfer the rest of it. And the way that most foundations work are that they have a long-term income stream, or at least are planned to do something during a period of time, so that instead of helping people just over a few years' time, the dividends from the shares can hopefully ensure that for example, students under a scholarship program will have a long-term source of support.
And you were saying that you hope this form of altruism would be contagious and that more rich Filipinos would actually establish that kind of systemic way of helping the population.
Yes, number one, it feels good. And number two, I think they can see that it is not good for their children to not need to work.
Okay.
So more of the rich people in this country should tell their children that they'll give their money away so that they'll have to earn a living instead of depend on their parents.
Let's see how many children will be complaining or start crying out afterwards. No, but yeah, it's a very noble purpose, and it's nice to hear you being saying that at such a young age. No.
Kong Lian, do you think you're being treated differently by your colleagues because you have this hardline stance against corruption? Hindi kayo takot kung sino man yung matamaan nyo. Do you think they're afraid of you?
Officially, everyone has a hardline stance against corruption.
But not like you, Kong.
I think that the difference is I have really been probing into the mechanics of how people make money from the DPWH and highlighting the fact that the bid rigging and kickbacks is really happening everywhere in the country. But we can't really establish who is receiving them, but someone is. You can see that in the high prices in all the projects and the quality of the work. And at least the different thing that I did that was a deviation from tradition in Congress was recently spotlight a colleague who has been doing a lot of business directly and indirectly with the DPWH while he is in Congress. And I qualify that because he is doing business in my own district and offered to park projects in my district. And a lot of members of Congress had similar experiences, especially in the 19th Congress, when the buying and selling of budgets significantly increased in frequency. And it's good that now this has been clamped down on, and at least other members of Congress are also being investigated by government for doing the same thing. But by bringing it to public attention, I think you can make sure that people don't slip through the cracks. Because my colleague whom
You can mention-
Yeah, you can
Uh,
mention his name.
know the name of Congressman of Construction Workers Solidarity Party List, Edwin Garjola, is actually the largest contractor in Congress today. He is number 2 in the DPWH to former Congressman Zaldico, according to the ICI when I first visited, and bigger than Vizcaya. And the ICI said that when I came, it was the first time his name was mentioned there. And a week later, he was included in the referral to the Ombudsman. So I think the media included is playing an important role in applying pressure. And I would actually say the moment that pressure eases, then even the people who are in the public eye today will be able to escape accountability. So it's important that even as difficult it is during the holidays, at least after the holidays, the public continue to hold the government to account on its promise na maraming magpapasko sa kulungan.
Yeah. You mentioned Representative Guardiola, and a lot of your critics were also then saying that why did you have to follow the Kiko Barzaga playbook and try to have a selfie with him right there on the floor of Congress? Would you like to comment on what the critics were saying, if that they were questioning your actions in that regard?
Thank you for allowing me to clarify that
Yeah.
people thought I followed him, but we're actually seatmates in Congress. The congressmen from Batangas are all seated next to each other. And I actually spoke with him on the phone a week before. And a member of Congress gave me his phone when he was on the line. And he said, mag-usap tayo kasama ni Speaker. And I wanted to ask him about what we were supposed to talk about, but he didn't want to talk anymore because after our phone call, he, of course, read about what I had been revealing about his projects in my district. And I think that there is a problem in Congress about people who are being alleged for massive, not even ordinary, as one can put it, but even by the standards of the Philippines, extraordinary levels of corruption, who are being treated as if it's all normal. And that was actually what triggered me to then manifest on the floor that we should be prioritizing looking in to the wrongdoings of people who are in Congress, because I think the public wants accountability, and we all know that the most accountable are in high positions in government until today.
But Kong, di ba, by you trying to get a selfie with Kong Garjola, did you purposely try to put him on the spot?
Oh no, it was a natural reaction because he's my seatmate who I hadn't seen for 3 months. I was talking with you right before this that people don't know that most people don't attend session, even if session is even only for less than half of the year. And he was standing in the middle of the entrance as I entered the hall. So just as one does when you see a seatmate whom you haven't seen for 3 months, you take the opportunity to take a selfie because you never know when you'll see him again.
But are you cordial with each other?
Until that meeting.
Until that moment.
Because, let me explain. I've met him during the campaign and after. He's offered projects in my district. And he's quite a sociable person because that's his business to arrange deals for DPWH projects in congressmen's districts. So I was continuing on the same manner that we did have many engagements before.
When you're talking about systemic corrections that we have to sort of like try to implement to really take corruption out of the picture. I mean, you were talking about the phenomenon of contractors, diba? These congressmen who are also contractors. I mean, that's not gonna disappear overnight, diba?
Actually, I'd like to share a new angle
Okay.
on your podcast now
Yeah.
than what we've discussed in the past, which is we just passed the 2026 budget of 6.79 trillion pesos. And I think the corruption issues will be overshadowed in 2026 by economic issues. Because the issue will no longer be that politicians are stealing from the government, but that there is less and less to steal because the country is going to have 19 trillion pesos of debt and is continuing to have a close to 2 trillion peso a year deficit. And it's just a matter of time before we will not be able to continue to increase government spending and that we will be forced to cut back on the national budget. The consequence of this is what have we been debating in the last week of the BICAM? Pork barrel in the DPWH, DOH, DA.
Yeah.
All of that will be naturally solved when there's no more money to fund the pork barrel.
Okay. And that the claim that blockchain could also help sort of create an aura of transparency. Do you subscribe to that and support that?
I support it,
Yeah.
but my point is that there's going to be less to trace when there's going to be less pork barrel at least, because I think the discretionary funds in government have ballooned over the past years. Back in the day, there was no AIX, MAIP, and the PIDA for Countryside Development Fund was only 70 million per congressman, if I'm not mistaken, and 200 million per senator. Now it's 20 times that, while the GDP has maybe only been 5 times that. So basically, the pork barrel as a percentage of GDP has quadrupled, to use that example. And if the pork barrel resulted in higher government revenues, then it will be sustainable, but it hasn't. Actually, I would think that one of the reasons why the peso has depreciated against the dollar is because a lot of people are moving their money offshore now. So it's not helped economic growth, and therefore will naturally correct itself because we will not be able to fund more of it, and there will be then less pork barrel and corruption in the coming years. But it will be a great loss to the Philippines because we basically had a few years when we overspent, let's say, 3 trillion pesos. Instead of having 5 trillion a year budgets, we had 6 trillion a year budgets. And that 3 trillion pesos could have gone to long-term investments in human capital infrastructure, but instead was lost. And we won't have another 3 trillion pesos of discretionary government spending again. So it's a very pessimistic outlook for the Philippines 2026 and beyond.
Okay, but you say that with a smile.
always smiling.
Okay, so like, what do you feel would be really the prescription then? Because you're saying less pork barrel, but you still need to spend. You still need to spend to create development.
It's very hard because the solution really has to come from the private sector, because the government has proven that it doesn't make good use of its budget. But the private sector doesn't want to invest now because of lack of confidence in doing business in the Philippines. It's good that the issues with the BAR LOAs have recently been raised, and we have a very good new Secretary of Finance, but we're inheriting a lot of debt, literally, that will make it difficult for investments to increase the country's productivity. But maybe one silver bullet will be if rich Filipinos, including those overseas, will bring back their money to help develop the country. But again, it seems it's like it's going in the opposite direction. And the educated and the wealthy Filipinos are more incentivized to leave now.
Okay. Having said that, do you sort of miss the private sector?
I have learned a lot in the last 6 months, and I enjoy learning. And actually, that's what I really like about being in Congress, because there's so much I can learn from my colleagues on how things work. But the more that I talk about it in the media, the less they tell me.
Okay. Go
Kong,
ahead, go ahead.
are you receiving mentorship from anyone? Because I know your mother set up a meeting with you and Senator Ping Lacson earlier. 'Cause
I
he's also an anti-corruption
think that
crusader.
he has a very good approach of finding information. It's really so hard to pin down corruption because, of course, there is an incentive to hide it, and there's also a culture of colleagues not exposing each other's congressional insertions because everyone has their own. But I think there's been a significant change in the past year of demanding more transparency on insertions. And it happens that Senator Lacson has ever since had this claim to fame of being the only senator with no insertions. So it's a very fitting time that everyone is now going towards this direction of at least in the recent BICAM pushing back on last minute or secret insertions in the budget.
Kung in Congress, in the House, di ba, there's the young guns. Then we have the hot shots. I'm talking about cliques. Do you have like a group with Kong Paulo Marcoleta and ex-commissioner Rowena Gonzon? I saw this reel.
Actually, I want to clarify. I highly respect so many of my colleagues in Congress for their own unique contributions. First, I think that we need an active minority because it has historically been the case that there is a supermajority in Congress. Maybe it's more in the Senate that there is a vocal minority. And within the minority in Congress, it's actually a very diverse group. And all of them are making great contributions. Whether that's from, for example, the Makabayan Bloc or from the likes of Representative Marcoleta or the Akbayan Bloc in the Liberal Party. I think that actually more of the members of the majority should be more outspoken as well. But the culture is naturally people have to bring home projects for their districts. And the fear is if you are outspoken, then your budget will be cut. But because there is a increasing raising of the bar of what is permitted, even by members of the majority. I would also like to credit Congressman Toby Chanco for helping expose many of the insertions and buying and selling of budgets in Congress, even while he is part of the majority. Then hopefully that will embolden more members of Congress to also be one with having more transparency and accountability.
This is your first term, no? So do you sense really a shifting in the way behavior, Congress sort of acts and stuff like that while you've been there in this time that the corruption scandal has
Yes,
broken?
because in August,
Yeah,
it was very different than now.
yeah.
And that's why I look forward to next year and wonder how much more different it will be then. It's going to be a very exciting next
And
2 years.
where would you want to position yourself, or how would you want the public to perceive you in terms of what your voice represents?
I just want to be as useful as I can be. And well, I think on the corruption in DPWH, a lot has already been exposed, although I think that not enough has actually been done in light of what has been exposed. Because, for example, the 2026 budget is still going to have a lot of bid rigging and kickbacks. Instead of flood control, it'll be in road projects, especially in asphalt overlay, where projects are 100% overpriced. And the DPWH tried to lower it in the budget, but the political reality was many pushed back. But I was saying that in the bidding, it can still be lowered too. And that many of the projects that we've been maligning as being tainted with corruption are still being implemented, and government funds are still being used to pay those contractors. So that's another thing that I'd like to bring up more in Congress when given the chance, which is why don't we cancel many of these 2025 projects that are not yet completed on the basis that they are either acquired illegally through bid rigging, or that the country can no longer afford to pay for actually the over 1 trillion pesos in DPWH projects that were appropriated for 2025. But my two-part answer to your question is, I think there's many more issues than just DPWH that should be discussed in 2026. And as I said a while ago, the economy will be the bigger issue, because it's not just about corruption, but also overspending. Even if there is no corruption, for example, in ayuda, even if it all goes to the people, we can no longer afford it. And it's sad that we used the window that we had to increase government spending on something that didn't have a long-term return.
Kong, speaking of the majority bloc, what do you think of Sandro Marcos's work so far as the majority leader? He's close to your age, diba? I think he's 31, 32.
It's amazing how he can keep the House productive amid all of the challenges in the current landscape.
You feel this is really part of this one big youth movement in the House, you included, of course?
Actually, the historic figures of the Philippines before were also very young. So maybe it's just reverting to the historical norm that it's people in their 30s that can help steer the country's direction.
The other thing that's very much in the public eye now, because the president was saying he really wanted to push it forward, was the anti-dynasty bill, no? What do you feel is the greatest misperception or misunderstanding on the part of the public in terms of what that bill represents? And if you would like to explain.
First, I will support the most restrictive possible anti-dynasty bill that is put forward. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are crafting more restrictive versions now, and I will support them when they come forward. But my contribution will be that we should not only limit politicians from dynasties, but that we should limit the number of politicians in our country in general. Because we keep on creating more congressional districts, and every congressman is an office budget. Can I share this sensitive point, which I will not probe too deep because this is actually one of the most closely guarded secrets in Congress. The overhead budget of Congress, which is including the Senate, approved in 2026 is 38 billion pesos. That is just for the offices, basically. Personnel services, maintenance and operating expenses, and other outlays. And the more politicians we have in the country at all levels, down to provincial, municipal, and city and barangay, the more of what should be going to the people is being eaten up by overhead. So maybe one can attribute it to my bias from the private sector that I think there is a need to right-size government. And I connect this to your question on anti-dynasty because I think one of the structural reasons why people are tempted to have their spouse, their cousin, their child also serve in government with them because we keep on creating positions.
Yeah, there are positions to fill, no? There are
So
positions to fill, yeah.
if we cut by 2/3 the positions in government, then there won't be dynasties anymore because there won't be enough positions to fill.
But who would be ready to be able to push a program such as that? Sort of like representation versus efficiency.
It's against the interest of politicians
Yeah,
to
that's why. So it won't be from them.
dissolve their positions. But I would argue that it's also to their disadvantage that there's so many positions to divide yourselves among. That's why you want to have more of your relatives occupying those positions. So maybe if there is a constitutional convention, then that would be a good opportunity to propose that, the Parliament of India has maybe the same magnitude of seats as the Philippines, but they have a population 12 times ours. So if we're thinking more radically, we could certainly decrease the positions in government, but without changes in the Constitution, at least we could also just right-size the agencies and positions in government now, and also reduce the growth in personnel that is being funded by our national budget.
So Kong Lian, no, as a neophyte in the House of Representatives, what has been the biggest revelation you've seen, or you've heard, or you've learned so far as a congressman that you're willing to share? But you can be as candid as you want.
It's hard to say what's the biggest revelation, but I think
The thing that shocked you the most.
one broad revelation is how inefficient government spending is, such that I have changed my opinion from advocating for increased government spending in certain sectors, for example, education and infrastructure, to admitting that even if it is directed correctly, it is still used inefficiently, and therefore, generally, we should just decrease government spending.
Coming from the private sector, that probably drives you crazy, the inefficiency you're talking about.
I think all taxpayers are angry. I actually sympathize more for the professionals that are paying a very big percent of their income to income taxes. I actually think that that's why some of the most vocal citizens are those in the professional class, because more than businessmen, it's the professionals that are shouldering a large percent of their income to income taxes.
In the political arena, besides your mom, who would you say has influenced you the most? Acted as mentors or guardians, or helped you form your own political philosophy?
Oh, it's hard to give one answer, but
Yeah, you can mention several.
I think philosophically, I'm leaning towards, I'm sorry to say it, but Elon Musk's advocacy in the US
Okay.
with his Department of Government Efficiency, where he attempted to cut the bureaucracy but eventually relented because of the resistance of the long-established bureaucracies in the US. But that I believe it's safe to follow his example because he wouldn't be where he was if he wasn't often right.
Yeah. So it's really sort of challenging the status quo. That's what you would like to see as your own personal philosophy in terms of how you'd be a politician.
But also actionably, to just have a bias against government spending, because when you're using your own money, you have to think of a very good reason to use it. But in Congress, we're just appropriating a billion here, a billion there. And I think that's how the private sector is run and how the government should be run too, where we should think about savings for once.
I know. But locally, are there sort of mentors at all in your political career besides your mother, or there's nobody really?
It's hard to just name one, but I think people in the private sector who have built big projects and created real value are good examples, because the unfortunate thing about government is you're only there for such a short time that you can hardly achieve something just in 3 years.
Well, some people aren't in government for a short time, right? That's the whole thing that we're trying to bring down, no? In terms of the dynasty aspect.
But they're always up for re-election, which is why their bias is to the short term.
But Kong, what do you think about the anti-political dynasty bill that was introduced by the leadership, specifically the speaker and majority leader?
Again, I personally would support the most restrictive possible version that will be put forward, but
You find it
I also
lacking?
I also find that the submission by the House leadership of even that version is, perhaps you can say, unprecedented politically. And even that version is probably too much for other members of Congress, which is why it should be credited that that was even submitted, but that the political realities will probably mean that it will be pushed back on. So it'll be interesting to see where that will end up. But whatever version is put forward will have my vote.
Why not file your own version?
I plan to file a bill to reduce the size of government.
Of government, size of government.
Actually, also something about the attendance of
Okay.
members of Congress, which will be another way that we can save, I think, on the 38 billion a year budget. But I will leave that to the proper time when I have the bill
You're talking
ready.
about the quorum.
No, just the expenses in Congress.
Yeah, so cost efficiency in terms of government spending.
It's okay to create more positions if people are going to work for free.
Okay. Yeah. You were mentioning, though, that in the private sector, you have had sort of like guidance or people that you looked up to, no? I know since 2013, when you set up Solar, no, you've worked with Manny Pangilinan, with Mr. Ricky Rason. There's sort of like insights in terms of how to run businesses or even be part of government that you learn from people, individuals such as those?
They think big.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because they've been leading their companies for a long time and they've outlasted so many administrations. And again, as I said, that's a problem with being in government, that you have a need to win re-election every few years. But that a lot of the job creation in this country has been by these people in the private sector. And frankly, the only hope for our country's economy in the next few years is if investment in the private sector will pick up.
You invested in the Solidaridad bookshop. What are your plans for that?
That was just a
bookshop?
small
I know, but what are
purchase
your plans for
to
that?
prevent it from
And
shutting
where,
down.
And where did that come from? Yeah.
I've been seeing the sales coming in at a very small amount per day. It's really not a business proposition to own a bookshop, but the idea is that first, if we didn't buy it, then it might have been turned into a condominium. So we'll just preserve it for its historical and cultural value, and maybe one day it will be valued for its historic and cultural value. So not all investments need to have cash flow if it is a um, if it is of historical value and one of a kind.
So you feel, in a sense, you're also holding it in trust for Mr. Shanil, or like it's just something that you feel has to be part of what will be considered as a heritage institution?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's nice. Very, you know.
Lian, do you think President Marcos's administration will be defined by his anti-corruption drive, and especially itong latter half ng kanyang term?
I think you can say that.
Can you rate it from 1 to 10 so far, yung kanyang anti-corruption drive?
We'll see, because I've been hearing a lot of views on who will be arrested in the next few weeks. I think that's a subject that a lot of people are fascinated about in the public. So the next few weeks will be very important.
Some are even impatient, reminding Mr. Remulla that he promised some arrests by December 15.
I saw his interview yesterday morning,
Yeah.
and I laud him for his commitment that there will be some big people held to account in the next few weeks.
But do you give the president credit at least for exposing the flood control corruption scandal?
Yes, because I said a while ago that the bar of what is permitted keeps on being raised. He broke the ceiling on what could be said in Congress, after which all of these investigations began. It's just that the ceiling keeps on being raised again and again. So I think there will be even more next year.
Okay. It's a week before Christmas. Is there a Christmas message you'd like to impart for your constituents, for example?
Well, I would hope that more wealthy people and members of government will be generous this Christmas.
Okay.
Because one, people generally should be, but especially now that the public is very distraught by issues of corruption, it would be timely and just. One thing that I have pushed in Congress is a wealth tax. If people are not voluntarily giving their money away, then maybe the government should just take it.
Okay. Involuntarily.
Yes, but actually, I've been planning to
Yeah.
call for that more in Congress, that if they don't want the public to demand that people give the wealth of politicians back to the government, then we should just voluntarily do so.
There's also the notion that here, historically with the Philippines, you know, they're very angry, they're very upset, and then the anger fatigue sets in, diba? And people begin to sort of lose sight of what it is they were first angry about, or how violently opposed they are to something. Do you feel that's happening already here?
I think the economy is weak, but isn't yet as weak as it will be next year. And when the economic crisis hits, then that could be the tipping point on the political stability of the
Which you
country.
feel is inevitable, no?
Yes.
That economic crisis by like what, middle of 2026?
I'm not sure what you would say is the tipping point, but it's already coming in, because I think the unemployment figures in November were announced to be 5%, and GDP maybe 2%. So we have taken it for granted for the past decade that the Philippines is one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. And this is the lowest GDP growth that we have had other than COVID, maybe for the last 15 plus years. And also the lowest foreign direct investment. And the education sector has also been measurably underperforming. And BPOs are at risk to AI. And tourism is also low. So there's a lot of bad news and very little good news about the Philippine economy. And I would just say that it is the natural incentive of any government to paint a rosy picture about the economy. Also because we have to sell government bonds to finance our national budget in the amount of 1.7 trillion pesos per year. So they shouldn't be entirely blamed for painting an overly optimistic picture of the economy. And that we're trying to propose the budgets of our respective agencies, so we have to say that things will be good next year. But the truth that the public should know is that we are approaching an economic collapse. And the sooner that the government cuts back spending to reflect that, the less painful it will eventually be. Because if, just like in a business, you're not going to do it gradually and you're just spending and spending and spending, then in a few years' time you'll go bankrupt.
Do you want to also make a comment on the power situation? Because I understand there also might be more brownouts again in 2026.
Actually, if the economy is growing slowly, then power will be in less of a shortage.
Yeah, so you might, because it's not required.
Yes. Because actually what's causing the GDP growth to slow is a decline in the growth of the industrial sector. There is no industry, basically, that is growing or increasing in this country. And again, maybe the consensus has been that tourism and the services sector should lift the economy, but I think even our advantages in that will be eroded by AI and by other countries in ASEAN.
Kong Lian, who do you think is your biggest ally in the House? Like someone who shares your views. It can't be like one man against the world. I'm sure somebody supports you.
It's very hard again to name one individual. Maybe I can write down 10 members whom I respect. But I have been working a lot, for example, with Congressman Chanco on advocating for more transparency on the insertions in the DPWH budget. Because one thing that I have said a lot about in the media is that even the projects in the National Expenditure Program are submitted by politicians or contractors, and it officially has to be denied. But documentary evidence would say otherwise. And there are also lists of proponents in the House and Senate, and many of these proponents are linked to the contractors of the projects that are eventually doing those projects. It's actually quite sad that I'll just say this directly. It's not true that most insertions are given to help constituents. Because in my district, I have seen the list of proponents of projects, and I know those projects because they're in my district, and no one in those towns or barangays knows that it was that person that proposed that project or requested that project from that person. So as it turns out, what happens is that a contractor thinks of an idea for a project, gives it to a politician, and gets it included in the budget. And if the politician is doing it simply out of altruism to the contractor, is for someone to speculate. But the allegation is that there is some other reason why that insertion is made. And again, that's very disappointing about the country. But again, this is not a view that I'm saying alone, because there are more senior members of Congress who have been raising it. And that's why there's a lot less insertions now for the 2026 budget.
Kong, when you voted no to the House GAB, you voted no, right? And you were the only member of majority to vote no. Were you called out privately for that?
People are afraid to tell me not to expose corruption because officially everyone is against corruption.
But again, they've never seen someone like you before.
Officially, we all agree that we should stop corruption.
What did your mom tell you when you did that?
I didn't tell my mom beforehand, and I didn't really talk to her much about it afterwards.
Did you get any reaction from her?
I don't talk about that so much with her because we have a very different philosophy where she is non-confrontational. She's been in government a long time and has relationships with a lot of people, including those who I'm indirectly
Opposing,
basically being critical of when we're talking about this. But I had no plan to enter politics 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I sold my company and found myself having free time. And then I started going to Batangas more often and seeing that I could be helpful if I threw my hat into politics. But my philosophy then is to just be as useful as I can in my job. And I don't really want to waste time having an uneventful term. So, bahala na lang po sinong matamaan kasi I believe that we should all just do the right thing.
But nagdagdag po ba kayo ng bodyguards recently because of your...
Yes.
We've been hearing about a very serious side of Leandro. Is there a light side, and what does that consist of?
Actually, I love being busy now because I don't have hobbies outside of work.
You don't?
And so now my schedule is full.
Okay. What was the last film you watched, for example?
I don't remember.
You don't even remember?
But I watch a lot of interviews on YouTube.
Okay.
Still about work.
Okay, that's right.
To follow the news.
Yeah. Is there like any music you were partial to when you were younger? No? Are you spoken for? Is there somebody else in
I
your
have
life?
no personal life
You have no
or
personal
hobbies
life.
outside of work.
Okay.
And fortunately, I now have a lot of work.
Okay. So if there was...
That's why it's so bad for people that I'm in Congress, because here's a person who doesn't need to earn from his
I know.
position
Yeah.
and is using what is available to him to be as useful as possible.
Yeah, it's all the time at your disposal, right? It's devoted to
And they can't buy me
congressional work. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't tell him anything.
or offer me anything.
Yeah, offer anything.
So what would happen if ever the day comes that you retire from politics? What would you do with your days?
I'm gonna keep trying to be useful.
Okay.
Kong, best life lesson for millennials or Gen Z? Kasi you're right in the middle, I think.
Learn as much as you can from the internet. We're very lucky that the past generation didn't have the internet growing up. And I think that's one reason to be optimistic, that there's no reason why the GDP in the Philippines should be $4,000 and the US $80,000 when we both have access to the same internet.
Yeah. But would you also say don't believe everything you see in the internet?
Well, you can ask ChatGPT if it's true or not.
Okay.
But I think that if we can give every young person in the country a good education and access to the internet, then why can't we bridge the gap between the income of someone working in the Philippines with someone abroad? Now, the unfortunate thing is that we aren't giving them those tools, but that it's not all hopeless.
Kong, I think I'll ask the last question. We asked the same question. That we asked the same last question to all our guests here in the sit down. We're gonna rate you. We're gonna rate your answer. If you would have your own talk show like this, if you would have your own the sit down, which person would you have as your guest from anyone in history, living or dead?